When governments talk about the cost of war, they speak in sanitized numbers. Defense budgets, military expenditures, strategic investments. But behind every bullet fired, every tank rolling across a battlefield, every missile launched into the night sky, lies a financial web so complex and so profitable that it has shaped the course of human history more than any general or politician ever could. Wars don't fund themselves. Someone always pays. And throughout history, those who control the purse strings have controlled the outcome of conflicts more decisively than those who control the armies. From Napoleon's desperate march across Europe to the endless conflicts of the modern era, victory has belonged not to the bravest soldiers or the smartest strategists, but to whoever could keep the money flowing the longest. The dirty secret of warfare is that it has always been, at its core, a business. And like any business, it has customers, suppliers, and investors. The only difference is that the product being sold is destruction, and the profits are measured in both gold and blood. Take the Napoleonic Wars, where this financial machinery first revealed its true power. While history books focus on battlefield tactics and political alliances, the real war was being fought in the counting houses of London. Nathan Mayer Rothschild, a German-born banker operating from the heart of Britain's financial district, became the invisible hand steering the fate of Europe. His network of agents across the continent could move gold faster than armies could move soldiers. When the Duke of Wellington needed £100,000 every month to keep his troops fed and armed in Spain and Portugal, it wasn't the British Treasury that delivered. It was Rothschild's private financial empire. But here's where it gets interesting. Rothschild wasn't just lending money out of patriotic duty. He was playing a much deeper game, manipulating exchange rates, speculating on bond prices, and collecting commissions at every turn. While soldiers died in muddy fields, bankers grew rich in marble halls. The family made what Nathan himself called the best business I ever did by financing Britain's war effort. They weren't just funding a military campaign, they were investing in an outcome that would reshape the global financial order in their favour. The pattern was set. Private financial networks discovered they could profit from conflict regardless of which side won, as long as the fighting continued long enough and the borrowing never stopped. Wars became investment opportunities dressed up as patriotic duty. Fast forward to the American Civil War, and the same dynamics played out on an even grander scale. Both the Union and Confederacy discovered that modern warfare required more than courage and strategy. It demanded an entirely new relationship with money itself. The Union printed greenbacks, paper currency backed not by gold, but by promises. The Confederacy issued greybacks in staggering quantities. Both sides learned that you could literally create money out of thin air to fund destruction, as long as people believed in your ability to win. But the real innovation wasn't in the printing presses. It was in who profited from the chaos. Northern industrialists who manufactured weapons and supplies grew wealthy beyond imagination. Banking houses that arranged loans and managed bond sales built fortunes that would last for generations. The war wasn't just fought between North and South, it was fought between those who owned the means of production and those who merely provided the labour and the blood. By the time World War I erupted across Europe, this financial machinery had evolved into something even more sophisticated. American banks, led by J.P. Morgan and Company, became the primary financiers for Britain and France years before the United States officially entered the conflict. Morgan's firm underwrote $1.5 billion in war loans to London alone. Kuhn, Loeb and Company, representing Rothschild interests in America, joined with other major banking houses to float massive loans to the Allied powers. Here's the crucial detail that most history books skip over. These weren't government-to-government loans. They were private financial institutions lending money to sovereign nations at interest, secured by the promise of future tax revenues. American bankers were literally betting on which side would win, and their bets influenced not just the outcome of battles, but the decision of whether America itself would join the war. When you've loaned billions to one side, neutrality becomes expensive and victory becomes profitable. The Federal Reserve System, which had begun operations in 1914, became the mechanism through which the American people unknowingly guaranteed these private loans. $25 billion flowed from American taxpayers to European governments, and while much of the principal went unpaid, the interest found its way back to New York banking houses. The public bore the risk, while private financiers collected the rewards. This wasn't an accident or an unintended consequence. It was the deliberate design of a system that had learned to monetize human conflict. War finance had evolved from a necessary evil into a self-sustaining industry, one that required continuous feeding to maintain its profits. The transformation was complete. What had once been the simple exchange of gold for soldiers had become a global network of financial interests that transcended national boundaries and political loyalties. Banks, defense contractors, and government officials discovered they shared a common interest more powerful than patriotism or ideology. They all profited when the machinery of war kept turning, and the machinery, once started, develops its own momentum. This momentum became unstoppable during World War II, when the scale of conflict demanded financial innovations that would reshape the global economy forever. The United States didn't just mobilize soldiers and factories, it mobilized the entire concept of money itself. War bonds weren't simply a way to fund the military. They were a psychological weapon designed to make ordinary citizens feel invested in outcomes they couldn't control. But while Americans bought bonds with their savings, thinking they were supporting democracy, a different transaction was taking place at the highest levels of finance. The military-industrial complex was being born, though it wouldn't receive that name for another 2 decades. Defense contractors discovered something remarkable. War wasn't a temporary disruption to business. War was business, and it could be made permanent. Companies like Lockheed, Boeing, and General Dynamics found that government contracts offered something the free market never could: guaranteed demand with no risk of customer dissatisfaction. If your product failed in the civilian world, you went bankrupt. If your weapon failed on the battlefield, you got a contract to build an improved version. Failure became just another billable hour. The genius of this system wasn't in its efficiency. It was in its ability to hide its true nature behind the language of national security. Every cost overrun became a patriotic necessity. Every delayed delivery became a technical challenge requiring additional funding. Every obsolete weapon system became proof that enemies were developing new threats requiring even more sophisticated responses. President Eisenhower saw this machine taking shape and tried to warn the nation in his farewell address. But by then, the web was already too complex to unravel. Defense contractors had learned to spread their operations across multiple states, ensuring that every congressional district had jobs dependent on military spending. Politicians couldn't vote against weapons programs without voting against their own constituents' livelihoods. The Cold War provided the perfect cover for this system to mature. The threat was abstract enough to justify any expense, but concrete enough to maintain public support. Nuclear weapons required constant upgrades. Conventional forces needed continuous modernization. Intelligence agencies demanded ever-expanding budgets to combat invisible enemies. The beauty of fighting communism was that victory could never be definitively achieved, meaning the funding could never be definitively stopped. Private financial interests learned to speak the language of geopolitics while pursuing the logic of profit maximization. Think tanks emerged to provide intellectual justification for military expenditures, funded by the same corporations that built the weapons being recommended. Former generals joined corporate boards immediately after retirement, bringing their Pentagon contacts and classified knowledge to companies seeking government contracts. The revolving door between public service and private profit became so routine that it stopped seeming corrupt. It simply became how the system worked. A defense secretary would leave office and join Lockheed Martin. A Lockheed executive would be appointed to run the Pentagon. The distinction between public interest and private gain blurred beyond recognition. By the time the Soviet Union collapsed, this financial ecosystem had grown too large and too profitable to simply disappear. New enemies had to be found or created. The war on drugs provided some justification for continued spending. terrorism offered even better opportunities. Unlike nation-states, terrorist networks could appear anywhere, anytime, requiring a global military presence and constant vigilance. September 11th became the ultimate business opportunity for an industry that had been searching for its next major conflict. The War on Terror offered everything the military financial complex needed: an enemy that could never be completely defeated, a battlefield that encompassed the entire planet, and public support for virtually unlimited spending in the name of security. Afghanistan and Iraq weren't just military campaigns. They were 20-year business plans that generated trillions in revenue for companies that had learned to profit from prolonged conflict. The longer the wars lasted, the more money flowed to contractors. The more complex the missions became, the more specialized services were required. Failure wasn't a bug in the system. Failure was the feature that kept the contracts coming. Modern war finance has evolved far beyond anything the Rothschilds could have imagined. Today's conflicts generate revenue streams that flow through hundreds of intermediaries. From weapons manufacturers to logistics companies, from private security firms to reconstruction contractors. Every aspect of warfare has been commodified and outsourced to entities whose primary obligation is to their shareholders, not to the soldiers or civilians caught in the crossfire. The financial web has become so sophisticated that it operates almost independently of the political decisions that supposedly drive military policy. Wars continue not because they serve national interests, but because they serve financial interests that have become too powerful to challenge and too profitable to abandon. The truth about war financing isn't hidden in classified documents or secret meetings. It's hiding in plain sight, buried under layers of patriotic rhetoric and national security jargon. Every time a politician speaks about defense spending, every time a news anchor reports on military aid, every time a citizen salutes a flag, the machinery hums quietly in the background, converting human conflict into shareholder value. From Rothschilds' gold shipments to Wellington's army to Lockheed Martin's quarterly earnings reports, the pattern has never changed. Those who control the financing control the outcome. Those who profit from the process ensure the process never ends. And those who pay the ultimate price, whether in blood on battlefields or taxes in peacetime, rarely understand the game being played in their name. The next time you hear about a military intervention, a defense budget increase, or a new weapon system, ask yourself, who benefits when the shooting starts? And who benefits when it never stops? The answer to that question reveals more about the true nature of warfare than any general's memoir or diplomat's treaty ever could. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand how money moves through the machinery of war, you'll never understand why the machinery keeps running at all. The secret funding behind history's biggest wars isn't secret anymore. Now you know where to look. If this opened your eyes to how money fuels war, hit subscribe. The battles change, but the financiers never do.